All right, we're doing a mini episode today with Katey Psencik Outka. Here just exclusively for email newsletter subscribers. Katey is the manager and executive producer of The Drag. They're an audio production house in Texas, student media, and the Moody College of Communication at University of Texas at Austin. The Drag produces more than a dozen podcasts that are all student run. One of them being the show called Darkness, a true crime podcast that is charted in the top 20 of Apple Podcasts alongside other big name podcasts, which with much larger budgets. So here to tell us more about The Drag is Katey. Katey, thanks for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me.
All right, so tell us a little bit about The Drag. So I found you on LinkedIn. And then stumbled upon The Drag and thought this was a really cool idea. So you and I started chatting about this. But like for people who don't know, just introduce us to what The Drag is and why it's cool.
Yeah, so The Drag is, as far as I know, if I'm wrong, I would love someone to tell me. As far as I know, it is the first and only like full-scale production house on a college campus, meaning that we do our own original shows and we do client projects with kind of on-campus departments at UT Austin. And by student run, I mean I am the one and only full-time employee with somewhere between 30 and 40 paid student staffers. I have not counted, but somewhere in that neighborhood. And they do everything from, reporting our long form shows to producing, pressing buttons in the studio or in the field to writing scripts to fact checking. We have a whole marketing team. We have graphic designers. We have student leadership. It's like a whole little operation.
Jeez, that's a whole conglomerate there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're managing all those people?
Yep. Yep.
And so how does it grow? Like, are you guys just like, all right, we need a marketing team now. We need
Yeah. It grows slowly, since I am the only person. I say slowly, but like we've gone from like 6 student employees when I started back in 2021 to, the more than 30 that we have now. But the way that we've grown is by introducing that student leadership team. That's a new thing that I've done this academic year, because long boring story, there were structural changes and I needed some extra hands. And so I've found success so far this semester, so far this academic year in that student leadership structure and kind of delegating, which is a hard thing for me. I'm a Virgo. I don't delegate. So that student leadership structure has been great for growth. The work for hire projects with our clients across campus has been great for growth because, that is a revenue generator for us and I pay all the students. So it's impossible for me to grow if I don't have the money to do so, to pay them. So yeah, really student leadership and those like really valuable client campus partners that we have.
Cool. So tell us about Darkness, because that's kind of like your flagship show, and then we'll kind of go from there. Tell us about the success of that show and what it's about. What are some of these episodes about?
Yeah, so the success of that show is like the only reason I have this job, quite frankly, because the first season came out in the summer of 2020. So that was before I was working at The Drag. It was really before The Drag even like existed as it does now. It was just this little like on-campus project that came as a part of like some endowment funds, basically. And so the first season, The Orange Tree, it was originally called The Orange Tree, came out in 2020. That charted in the top 20 of Apple Podcasts, got a lot of attention from advertisers, from donors to the university, from just like, people in the audience. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I was able to get hired. The founder of The Drag is a former professor, mentor, friend of mine. And so that's how I got involved and how I applied for the job. But after that, we started working on more true crime seasons. So season 1, The Orange Tree, is about a murder that happened in the student neighborhood of West Campus at UT in 2005. And so after that, we were working on these other true crime shows, and they were going to be different standalone shows, but they were all true crime stories that were happening in Austin or in Texas that were relevant to this broader group of people. And so I was like, let's not build an audience from scratch. Let's just make this different seasons of the same show. And so then I did like a fun little word cloud with a bunch of Post-it notes on this wall over here, and came up with Darkness. And so now there are 4 seasons out, and each season focuses on a different true crime story in Texas. We try to do a true crime that has some kind of like moral lesson or takeaway or some kind of broader issue that we can pull apart. So it's not just like true crime for true crime's sake. Some people do that. Fine for them. That's not really what we do. And so each one has this kind of undertone of a larger issue at play. Like the most recent season was about the sniper on the UT Tower in the 60s. And so the student who worked on that really turned it into a story about school shootings and how her generation has grown up with this being completely normal and why that's not okay and what can be done. So yeah.
That's cool. I like that there's a moral there. The moral going deeper than like maybe don't be a sniper.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe don't do that. Pick a different career path.
Right.
So you mentioned you had client shows and then original shows. So like, what's the difference? And then like, how does the process differ?
Yeah. Those client shows really vary. Some of them we are just given a little bit of funding and they're like, go wild, be creative, do your thing. We just want our name attached to it. So an example of that, we got a little bit of money from this research group called Planet Texas 2050 at UT. We did a podcast called Planet Texas because it was such a great name. We couldn't change the name of it.
Of course.
About climate change solutions in Texas and those working toward those solutions. And so they gave us kind of a blank check and just assisted us and provided their researchers. So that's kind of one way that we do the client projects. And I think that started before I was working here, so I don't really know how that relationship started. But that's like kind of the one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum is a show we have releasing right now is with our client, the Macomb School of Business at UT. And so that was a little more straightforward. They were like, we want to interview Macomb's alums, friends, donors about their careers in business. We'll find the people. This is the format we want. We just need production help and we need a student host. And so that was kind of the other end of the spectrum where they had this specific vision that they wanted us to then kind of usher into existence. So it kind of exists on either end of the spectrum and a lot of different places in between. No 2 client projects we've done have been the same. Like we did a walking tour of Waller Creek, which runs through campus. And so that was like a lot of sound design and like playful little like fun little 2-minute segments for this walking tour. We're working on an oral history project. Like there's all kinds of different stuff that we're doing all within the audio space, not just podcasting.
Yeah. Well, what excited me about that was just the idea of like working on like students getting to work on like real stuff, that like people are actually listening to. This isn't like a student research project where they're just making something up to research or something like that. It's like it's like an actual thing where there's an audience and there's some stakes involved and there's people paying for this and things like that. So what like excites you about the opportunity for students and like where they might take this experience in the future?
Yeah, I mean, my background is in journalism. I worked in newsrooms before this, and so I very much run the drag like it's a newsroom, that, we're all just these journalists or creators or whatever working together to achieve this goal. I treat the students like equals. I treat them like adults. They're adults. And I'm just like their editor, their spirit guide, their big sister, their therapist, whatever they need that day. But it's really like a teach them to fish kind of situation. So it gives them an opportunity to really thrive in a pretty independent working environment, I think, and also in an environment where they are interfacing with clients. They are interfacing with our listeners. They're responding to Instagram DMs that are not always super nice. Mostly nice, but not always.
You mean the internet's not like a 100%, flowery place to be?
Yeah, they're learning that. I mean, they already know that, but they're really learning it. And so it's just like, I try to make it the closest thing to a professional experience that I can give them in the environment that we're in. And I think that's what is so interesting and fun about this for me and them. And I think it's what sets the drag apart. And not to mention, they're working on like actually commercially successful stuff. It's just like you said, it's not just a student project. Like, it's an actual like creation that people outside of campus have listened to, and actually only 17% of our audience is even in Texas. So like there are people all over the country, all over the world hearing their work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, I look back at, I've hired a lot of, video people, creative people, and the ones that are coming straight out of school are typically, I don't mean to be super negative with it, but the ones that have this very academic relationship with video production are usually the worst. And the ones that have really like kind of like been through the fire and like just, they've worked at a church or something like that, where they've just had to produce, storytelling content week after week for services, or, they've actually just had real world video experience. Those are typically like the best ones. And I think for me, that's how I learned, video production, audio production was, I had no formal training. I was fired from a previous job because I kept wanting to do videos and do like marketing for them, and they're like, this isn't what we need you to do, so you should just go do that. So my buddy hired me, and I had edited like some birthday videos or something like that, and he's like, cool, whatever, like, you start Monday. So he just like threw me into it, and like within a couple of years I was like helping run the business and stuff like that, and learning how to run an entire production company, and all of that I just learned by him just being like, okay, off you go.
Right, exactly. And that's like, obviously it's challenging to be the only full-time person who's like, in charge of this whole operation, but I think it also is valuable for the students because I don't have the willingness or the time to micromanage them. And so it's very much like, if you're going to make a mistake, make it, and then we'll figure it out, and we'll pivot, and you learned a valuable life lesson, and I've learned how to be a better manager, and everyone wins.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. You learn by making a lot of mistakes, and it's you hope that those mistakes aren't at critical moments.
Yeah, and sometimes they are, and that's when I remind myself that they're 20 and it's just a podcast and no one's dying.
Yeah, I've had like, send like videographers out on the previous company. We used to shoot a lot of weddings at the previous company I worked for, and we'd have these freelancers, and it's like, oh, you didn't hit record during the toast, during the father of the bride speech. What was going through your mind then? It's kind of a critical of all the times to hit record. That would be the one. Yeah.
Yeah. But it happens. It happens.
Yeah, totally does. And I shouldn't, I can say this because even on this podcast, I'm now 39 years old. I have gotten several questions in to a podcast with a high profile guest and realized that I had been recording that whole time. So.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, there are things like with the students that I mess up all the time, and they're like, Katey, I don't think this is right. And I'm like, ooh, correct. You're right. Yeah. Here's your reminder that I too am a person who's learning, which I think is also good for them. Like, again, I treat them like equals.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Okay, so where can people check out the shows on The Drag?
Yeah, so we're at The Drag Audio everywhere. If you search The Drag Audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, all of our shows are linked so you can find everything. Our website is thedragaudio.com. We put all of our latest episodes, they like feed into the homepage so you can see all of our shows. That's where you can find me and names of students and whatever else you might want to know.
Cool. Where can people connect with you at if they have questions?
Yes. So I am at Psencik K on Twitter or X. I'm not on there very much for obvious reasons these days, but I'm easily Googleable. LinkedIn is a great place to find me, just my full name. I'm the only one with this name, so if you find someone who is named Katey Psencik Outka, you have found the right person.
Yeah, or at least you're the one with the tattoos.
Yes, that's me. Tattoos in my LinkedIn profile pic, you found the right person.
Yeah, cool. All right, awesome. This has been great. Thanks so much for being here and introducing us to this work.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was fun.